My name is Tessa Caldwell. I'm 41 years old, a software engineer living in Philadelphia, and I've spent most of my life studying other people instead of myself. I learned early how to listen more than I spoke, how to read a room, how to sense when someone needed help before they admitted it. I became useful, reliable, the one who picked up the phone, who sent the money, who said sure before anyone finished asking. Over time, that role stopped feeling like something I did and started feeling like who I was. So when the year-end family dinner came around, I didn't feel excitement or dread, just habit, the kind you could perform, half asleep. The hearth and crown looked exactly the way it always did in December. Evergreen garlands laced with warm golden lights framed the windows. A fire crackled in the stone hearth, throwing shadows that softened everything it touched. The air smelled faintly of cinnamon, citrus peel, and expensive wine. Glasses chimed, voices overlapped. It was comfort by design. My parents arrived first, sweeping in with practiced confidence, coats still on, already talking about traffic and reservations and how busy the city had become. My younger sister Brooke followed close behind them, balancing her purse and her phone while her 3 kids surged forward, loud and hungry and fearless. I felt the familiar shift in the room as attention bent toward them. My daughter Emma stayed close to my side. She was 11, old enough to notice things, young enough to still hope they didn't mean what they felt like they meant. Her fingers curled into the seam of my coat as we walked. Before we even reached the table, the maitre d' spotted me. His face lit up like he'd been waiting. "Miss Caldwell," he said warmly, already stepping toward us. "Your usual table by the fireplace." A server appeared almost instantly, smiling wide. "Good evening. I saved the leather menu for you," he said, placing the thick, gold-stamped VIP menu in front of me first, with care. The moment stretched. My father's eyebrows lifted before his eyes slid away, as if embarrassed by something he couldn't name. Brooke's smile tightened, confused, calculating. Emma stared at the menu, then up at me, then back again, like it might disappear if she blinked. We sat. Drinks were ordered. Brooke's kids launched into excited chatter about lobster tails and king crab, arguing over desserts before entrees had even been chosen. I pretended to read the menu, though I already knew exactly what was on it. I always did. That was when my father cleared his throat. He didn't look at me directly. He aimed his voice instead, the way he always did when he was issuing a rule he expected to be followed. "Make sure Emma orders something cheap," he said. "We're not covering her tonight." Emma's fingers went still on the edge of her children's menu. For a second, the room felt thinner, like the fire had swallowed all the air. The hum of conversation around us faded into something distant and hollow. I nodded once, slow and controlled. "Okay," I said, but inside me, something old and patient, something that had been holding steady for decades, shifted just slightly, like a bolt beginning to slide free. My father's words shouldn't have surprised me. They didn't. They simply gave a name to something I'd been carrying for as long as I could remember. I was the steady one, the responsible one, straight A's, honor roll certificates tucked into drawers, weekend shifts taken without complaint. I learned early that praise came when you didn't need anything. Brooke, on the other hand, was treated like something fragile. When she crashed Dad's SUV at 16, the house filled with sympathy instead of consequences. A newer model appeared in the driveway a few days later, and the old one was never mentioned again. When I asked about college, tuition, Mom smiled the way she did when she thought she was being reasonable. She told me to be practical, reminded me that my old sedan still ran just fine. Brooke quit college after a year because she needed to reset. My parents paid for a long Europe trip so she could find herself. I stayed, worked nights, stacked grants and scholarships, and earned my engineering degree in the quiet hours when exhaustion felt like a second skin. I invited them to my graduation. I crossed the stage alone while my phone buzzed with apologetic texts from Barcelona. Once I moved to Philadelphia and started working, the pattern settled in. Calls came at convenient times, always framed as temporary emergencies. A storm damaged the roof. Property taxes were higher than expected. Brooke's car was repossessed. I wired money, told myself families help each other, told myself it wouldn't last. Still, I kept a spreadsheet. Dates, amounts, totals. Not because I planned to confront anyone, but because I needed proof that what I was giving was real. At a tech conference, I met Evan Cole, He was calm in a way that didn't demand attention. He fell for me first, then for Emma, and then for the quiet life I kept trying to protect. One night, after noticing another transfer leave my account, he said gently, "Tess, you're allowed to say no." I laughed like it was a joke I didn't quite get. Emma didn't laugh. She noticed everything. Her science fair trophy earned a distracted nice. Before my parents turned back to Brooke's kids. They missed Emma's first violin recital, then showed up early with snacks and cameras for a cousin's game. On Emma's birthday, she got a card. Her cousin got a tablet. Driving home that night, Emma stared out the window for a long time before asking softly, "Why don't they like me?" Now she sat beside me at the hearth and crown, shoulders tight, eyes lowered, trying to disappear. My father waited for my response, confident in the reflex he'd trained into me. I felt that inner bolt slide another inch, the sound loud only to me. I closed the menu. I looked up at the waiter. "Separate checks," I said evenly. "Mine covers me and Emma. Everything else goes on their card." The waiter nodded without hesitation and placed the tablet in front of my father, as if this had always been the plan. My father's mouth opened, then closed again. For a moment he looked genuinely confused, like the ground had shifted under rules he thought were permanent. My mother's smile thinned until it was barely there at all. Brooke's eyes sharpened, narrowing in a way I'd seen before, when something didn't go her way and she couldn't understand why. The receipt printer chirped softly. Dad stared at the total on the screen, then at me, waiting. Waiting for my old reflex to kick in, waiting for me to rescue the moment the way I always had. I stood up. "Emma, coat," I said. My daughter slid out of her chair immediately. Her shoulders were still tight, but her hand found mine fast, like she'd been holding her breath. We walked past the fireplace, past the garlands and warm lights, and out into the cold December air. The door closed behind us with a soft final sound. Evan was waiting at the curb, engine humming. He opened the back door for Emma. I shook my head once, barely. "I'm done," I said. On the drive home, the city lights blurred. Past the windows. I opened my banking app. First, I canceled the credit card I'd loaned my parents. Then the club dues. Then the streaming bundle. Then the internet bill. Then the lawn service. One confirmation after another. Each tap felt like a small release, a quiet breath leaving my chest. The next day, Brooke asked me to meet for coffee. She looked confident when she arrived, until I slid the spreadsheet across the table. Page after page of dates and numbers. Her lipstick faded as she flipped through it. "I didn't know," she whispered. "You never asked," I said. "That's the point." I went home and muted everyone. The weeks that followed were strange at first, too quiet. Then they became steady. Emma picked up her violin again. One evening she played her entire piece without stopping. Evan filmed from the couch, smiling. I clapped until my palms were warm. The peace in the room didn't feel borrowed anymore. It felt earned. Here is a deeply expanded emotional outro you can use after Part 3, keeping the same tone and story, slow, reflective, and satisfying. That night, after Emma went to bed, I stood in the doorway of her room longer than usual. Her violin case rested against the wall, stickers peeling at the corners. Her breathing was even, peaceful in a way I hadn't seen in months. For the first time I understood how much silence I had mistaken for safety, how often I had chosen calm over truth. Evan wrapped an arm around my shoulders without saying anything. He didn't need to. The house felt different, lighter, but also exposed, like we'd opened a window after years of stale air. I expected guilt to rush in. It didn't. What came instead was grief. Not for what I'd lost, but for how long I'd allowed it to continue. The messages came anyway. Missed calls, voicemails, long texts that swung between confusion, anger, and accusation. I didn't end them. I let them sit unread, proof that I was no longer required to explain myself to people who had never truly listened. A few days later, Emma asked if we could frame her science fair certificate. Not the trophy, the certificate. I said yes, and we hung it in the hallway where everyone could see it. She smiled at it every time she passed, like it mattered now. Like she mattered. Weeks turned into routines that belonged to us. Saturday breakfasts, practice sessions that ended in laughter instead of pressure. Evan cooking dinner while Emma and I argued over music. Nothing extravagant, nothing loud, just steady. One evening, as I tucked Emma in, she asked, "Are we in trouble?" I sat on the edge of her bed and shook my head. "No," I said, "we're just choosing ourselves." She thought about that for a moment, then nodded, satisfied. Kids understand fairness better than adults ever do. Sometimes I still think about the dinner, the fire, the menu, the moment everything changed. Not with rage or shouting, but with a sentence spoken calmly and followed through completely. I learned that boundaries don't need drama to be real. They only need consistency. I didn't stop being kind. I stopped being available to be diminished. And in that quiet choice, in walking away without begging to be understood, I finally became someone I could recognize.